Hey everybody, this is your Digital Super Saiyan 3 back here with another video. And this is my August pay-per-view review. For the month of August, I chose to do WWF Summerslam 1991, the match made in heaven and the match made in hell. Took place on August 26, 1991 in New York, in Madison Square Garden, baby. We're back in the world's most famous arena. That's right, we're in New York City. And of course, SummerSlam is this week, or is this weekend actually, this Saturday. So, yeah. Why not do my review of SummerSlam 91 right now to whip it out while SummerSlam is going to be happening this week. On the commentary team, you got the likes of Bobby the Brain Heenan, Rowdy Roddy Piper, and Gorilla Monsoon. So, let's get busy. Yes, on Saturday night's main event, Macho Man Randy Savage had proposed to Miss Elizabeth. And at SummerSlam, the festivities for a wedding will be happening. Yes, that's right. So, the kayfabe marriage of Macho Man Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth, the wedding, the match made in heaven, is going to be happening here at SummerSlam. Meanwhile, on the other side of the spectrum, we got the match made in hell. We got Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior taking on the team of Sergeant Slaughter, Colonel Mustafa, and General Abnon, with Sid Vicious as the special guest referee. And where does Sid Vicious's loyalty lie? Is it with Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, or is it with the trio of terror, which was Slaughter, Mustafa, and Abnon? Anyway, on to the first match of the show, and it is a 6-man tag match, as you got the team of the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, the Dragon, Ricky Steamboat. Yes, that's right, Ricky Steamboat returned to the WWF in the early 90s, or in 1991, but then eventually he returned to WCW after this. And of course, the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, as they take on the team of Power and Glory and the Warlord, with the Doctor of Stylish, Slick. Yes, that's right, the Slickster. And this was a solid opening match. This was not good, not bad, but it was very solid working. It was a really solid opening match. Steamboat got the victory for the team, although he would be the one to go back to although he would return to WCW shortly after this. So, in all sense, it's kind of weird that Steamboat is the one who gets the victory here, even though he would eventually return to World Championship Wrestling shortly after this. Alright. So, we cut to backstage with Sean Mooney as he is interviewing Mr. Perfect for his upcoming Intercontinental title defense against Bret the Hitman Hart. And Mr. Perfect has this guy called the Coach, in his corner. He's got this guy called the Coach. He's the reigning Intercontinental Champion. He said, Bret, you may be excellent, but you're not perfect. And so we get into our next match. Mr. Perfect versus Bret Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. This was the match of the night. The second match on the show, and it's already the match of the night, because why wouldn't Perfect and Bret tear the roof off of Madison Square Garden, which they did. They did tear the roof off of Madison Square Garden that night in 1991 in that IC title defense. Like, you see Perfect's singlet get torn to shreds in this match, and he's only left with, like, the trunks part, and he's taking on Bret here. And also, Perfect injured his back during this match. So, yeah, kudos to Curt Hennig for finishing the damn match with a bad back. Bret Hart ended up locking in the sharpshooter, and he ends up winning the Intercontinental Championship that night. This showed that Bret Hart had arrived as a single star, as he won his first singles title. And then, a year later, he would eventually win the big one. We have Lord Alfred Hayes with the Hart family as they're celebrating with Bret, as Stu Hart and Helen Hart are up in the stands. You know, they celebrate with Bret, you know, as Bret is celebrating with his family and his parents being there at ringside. Of course, that's always a treat whenever you see a Bret Hart match live, and Stu Hart happens to be in the crowd. Next up, we get into one of the worst matches on this show. And yes, there are a few duds on this show. And that is our first dud of the night, our first bad match of the night. You have the Natural Disasters with Jimmy Hart defeating the team of the Bushwhackers with Andre the Giant in their corner. Yes, you heard me right. Andre the Giant in 1991 is in the corners of the Bushwhackers. And yes, Andre is on freaking crutches. He had his knee taken out. He's on crutches. He's coming out with the Bushwhackers. Anyway, the Natural Disasters get the win. And the Bushwhackers, they're getting beaten down at the end of this match. They're being beaten down by the Natural Disasters. The Natural Disasters are beating down both Luke and Butch. And then out comes the Road Warriors. Out comes the Legion of Doom, Hawk and Animal. They all come out. They both come out to come to the aid of Andre and the Natural Disasters. And, well, that's all I could say about that, because they also got a tag team title match later on in the night against the Nasty Boys, who are also being managed by Jimmy Hart. Now, we are getting set for our next match, which is for the $1 Million Championship. You have Sean Mooney interviewing Ted DiBiase, who's got Sensational Sherry in his quarter for this $1 Million Championship match against his former bodyguard, Virgil. So at the 1991 Royal Rumble, we all know the story. Virgil had basically turned on Ted DiBiase and clocked DiBiase with his $1 Million Championship. Now, he challenged DiBiase for a match at WrestleMania 7, on which Virgil won the match via disqualification. So, now, we get the long-awaited rematch at SummerSlam. And, okay, this is probably the best match of the two, and probably Mike Jones's best match, as Virgil wasn't really that great in the ring. I mean, yes, he had someone like at least you know, he had someone like DiBiase to work with, because DiBiase was the better wrestler of the two. Anyway, Sherry clocked Virgil with her purse, which might have had something loaded in it. The referee made a decision to say that to send Sherry back into the locker room, and thus leaving it to be one-on-one between Virgil and DiBiase. Virgil gets the handful of tights. 1, 2, 3. Virgil is the new $1 Million champion, and he is celebrating with Roddy Piper. You know, because Roddy Piper throughout this match, you know, he was supporting Virgil. He was in Virgil's corner at WrestleMania, and now he's calling Virgil's match, and he gets up celebrating with Virgil. And then Bobby Heenan, you know, he ends up going backstage real quick to Hulk Hogan's dressing room, and he's saying, on behalf of the real world's heavyweight champion, you know, he's knocking on Hulk Hogan's door. He's representing Ric Flair. Oh yes, Ric Flair would debut after this. He would debut in September. Yes, 1991, Ric Flair debuts for the WWF. He would make his WWF debut in September following SummerSlam. So yeah, as Bobby Heenan goes to Hulk Hogan's dressing room, he gets the door slammed on him. Bobby Heenan gets the door slammed on him because only the Weasel could get a door slammed on him, because the Weasel was just that unlikable. And now we get into our next match. It is the Jailhouse Match, as the Big Boss Man will be taking on the Mountie with Jimmy Hart. I'm the Mountie! Okay, so yeah, the second time I watched this match was really good. Okay, before this, the Mountie was with New York's Finest. He's telling New York's Finest, while doing an interview with Sean Mooney, about how he wants them to treat the Boss Man when he wins the match. He wants the police to drag the Boss Man to the paddy wagon that he's in front of. And then, of course, you have the Boss Man talking with Mean Gene Okerlund. And then we get into the actual match itself. Mountie tries to use his stun gun, or tries to use that taser of his on the Boss Man, but he wasn't able to. Instead, Boss Man hits his signature Boss Man slam. 1, 2, 3, and the Boss Man wins, and you're seeing the Mountie go to jail. Yes, you heard me right. All throughout the night, we get updates from the Mountie in jail as he's being booked. Like, you see the Mountie get dragged out of the arena in handcuffs, being thrown into the back of a police paddy wagon. Yes, the Mountie is going to jail, and Jimmy Hart is beside himself, and he's like, I gotta get my lawyers on the line. They better not harm a hair on the Mountie's head. I love this freak out from Jimmy Hart here as he's trying to get the Mountie out of jail. As the Mountie has to spend the night in the Slammer. He is going directly to jail. They process him, they book him. It's crazy. And then we get our next match onto the show, as we're getting into the next half of the show. Our next half consists of a match between IRS and Greg the Hammer Valentine. It was alright for what it was. Greg Valentine got beat by IRS. IRS got the victory. Nothing more to be said here. Even though IRS came out with no music, or he was already in the ring, but Valentine came out with music, and he still lost. So there you go. Next up, we get into our next of 3 title matches on this show, as you got for the WWF Tag Team Championships, as you got the Road Warriors defeating the Nasty Boys to become the new World Wrestling Federation Tag Team champions on this show. And for the most part, it was a very solid match. This was like a street fight, I believe. I think this was like a street fight. This was, not many weapons were used, but you know, I'm glad that the Legion of Doom actually won this match and actually became 3-time WWF Tag Team Champions. Even though they weren't originally a WWF tag team, but, you know, they still found success in the Federation, regardless. Next up, we have the match made in hell. So here it is, what we all been waiting for, the match made in hell, as Hulk Hogan, the WWF champion, teams up with the Ultimate Warrior to take on Sergeant Slaughter, General Adnan, and Colonel Mustafa. Now, before I get into the match, yes, Colonel Mustafa is actually the late Iron Sheik. Yes, the Iron Sheik made a return to the Federation, this time wrestling as a different guy, but we still could tell it was him. Yes, because he was still wearing those pointy wrestling boots, and we still recognized his face, because the Iron Sheik has a really distinctive face. And of course you got Sid Vicious, who had just made his Federation debut, or Sid Justice, I meant to say. Yes, he was under the name of Sid Justice when he came to the Federation, and, you know, he's wearing this sleeveless referee shirt, and he's wearing these black gym pants, these long black gym pants. And the way Sid Justice makes his entrance, he comes out, he jumps on the apron skirt and comes directly into the ring. Then you got the trio of terror making their debut, or making their entrance. You have Slaughter, Adnan, and Mustafa, aka the Iron Sheik, coming out. They're making their entrance next, and then out comes the Ultimate Warrior in a big rush. As the Ultimate Warrior, you know, he runs to the ring after he and Hulk Hogan had cut their pre-match promo with Mean Gene Okerlund, or Sean Mooney, I forgot it was. But anyway, then out came the Hulkster. Out came the WWF champion. Oh yes, and did I forget to mention the WWF title was not on the line on this show? I know, right? The World Wrestling Federation Championship was not on the line on this show, but yes, it was on the line in the previous year's SummerSlam in 1990, but not so much for 1991. Anyway, this was not a good match. This was the other stinker in the first half of the double main event, because the other half would be the wedding, the match made in heaven. Anyway, the match made in hell, Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior win after Warrior had chased both Adnan and Slaughter, or had chased both Adnan and Mustafa backstage with a chair. Sid Justice counts the 1, 2, 3, and Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior win. Oh yes, and if you didn't watch the Warrior's Dark Side of the Ring episode, yeah, the Warrior was fired after this, because he had held Vince McMahon up for so much money. God damn it, Warrior. If you weren't such a greedy ass, if you weren't such a fickle asshole, maybe then people wouldn't have found you so hard to work with in the first place if you weren't so fickle. I digress. Now, okay, and then Hogan asks Sid Justice to come back back down to the ring, and Sid Justice obliges. He comes back down to the ring, and he and Hogan start posing in the ring together. Yes, you heard me right. Hogan was doing his signature posing, and he was doing it with Sid Justice, the referee who was so chiseled. Mind you. And now we're getting into it. What we all been waiting for, the match made in heaven. Before this, we had before this, all throughout the night, Randy Savage, while getting ready, was in his dressing room. He was making phone calls. You know, he was talking on the phone. Now he's ready to get married. And before the wedding could commence, they show a video package of Randy Savage's career with Elizabeth during their long stint in the Federation. Randy Savage and Elizabeth together throughout his career. Randy Savage had his career ended at WrestleMania 7 when he lost a career versus career match to the Ultimate Warrior. And Savage, he would end up getting beaten down by Sensational Sherry, which led to Elizabeth coming down to the ring to help Savage. And Savage and Elizabeth then reconcile, and now they are getting married here at SummerSlam. So now the wedding is on, and Randy Savage comes out first. He is all decked out in this white and gold suit, and the suit has tassels, and Randy is wearing the sunglasses and his signature hat. And of course, then you have the Reverend who's there, aka Rich Herron. Yes, Rich Herron, who won the Warrior Award in 2021. Yes, he is the officiant who officiated this wedding between Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth. You have the best man, you have the groomsmen, the bridesmaids, the flower girls, the ring bearer, and then finally out comes Elizabeth herself wearing this wedding dress, wearing this long wedding dress. You know, and this was one of those wrestling weddings that never got destroyed by Triple H. Because it's funny, because Triple H wouldn't debut until 95. Anyway, yes, this was one of the best weddings that ever happened in the WWE. In WWE history, this was the only wedding that didn't consist of any bullshit. Anyway, this was just about love. As both Elizabeth and Savage said their I do's and finally kissed, and the streamers were coming down, thus ending the 1991 SummerSlam as tears in the arena were flowing, just like they did at WrestleMania 7, and again here tonight as the wedding between Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth comes to a complete end. So that was SummerSlam 1991. Final thoughts? I gotta say it's actually one of the better SummerSlams I've seen from the 90s. Actually one of the best SummerSlams from the 90s. Yes, the 90s did have their fair share of bad SummerSlams, but this was actually one of the best SummerSlams from the 90s era. And that's saying a lot. Anyway, yeah, so that was SummerSlam 1991. Anyway, next time in September, I will be doing WWE Breaking Point 2009. Anyway, see ya!